It was just another quiet Tuesday morning in the heart of Amsterdam, where the canals glistened under the rising sun and the city slowly stretched into life. At the front entrance of the five-star Grand Vermeer Hotel, the doorman tipped his hat to a black luxury sedan that pulled up silently to the curb. The driver stepped out quickly, circling around to open the back door. Out stepped a tall man in his mid-50s, wearing an impeccable dark suit, his silver hair combed neatly back, sunglasses shielding his eyes. Anyone who had worked long enough in the hotel industry knew who he was, the elusive American millionaire Thomas Greystone. Greystone was known for his silence, his routine, and his uncanny ability to disappear behind a wall of privacy. He didn't speak much, rarely stayed in the same place twice, and only ever traveled with a small leather case, supposedly filled with notes he scribbled during long flights. Nobody quite knew what he did exactly, or how he'd made his money, but his influence whispered through boardrooms and high-level deals like a ghost people feared and respected. He had arrived at the Grand Vermeer unannounced, as always, booking the penthouse for a single night. He was there for a meeting. Who it was with, no one knew. Inside the hotel, life moved with smooth precision. Uniformed staff bustled discreetly down the back hallways. Linen carts wheeled quietly between rooms, and bellboys moved luggage with choreographed grace. Among them was a black woman in her late 20s, dressed in the standard navy blue Maid's, uniform with her name tag pinned neatly to the top, Marisha Lau. To the guests, she was just another part of the hotel's seamless background, a quiet presence, polite and efficient. But to the staff, Marisha was more than a housekeeper. She was reliable, smart, always on time, and never one to gossip or get involved in the usual workplace drama. Some even whispered that she had once been a school teacher or a translator back in South Africa before moving to the Netherlands. But nobody ever asked too many questions. In a place where guests came and went with secrets in their suitcases, privacy was sacred, even among the workers. That morning, Marisha was working on the 9th floor, carefully adjusting the curtains, in room 912 when her work phone buzzed. It wasn't unusual. Housekeeping often received last-minute instructions from the front desk. But this time, when she answered, something strange happened. "Hello?" "Ja, ek luister," she said without thinking. The voice on the other end continued, in Dutch, but as Marisha responded, something about the way she spoke made her stop mid-sentence. She had slipped into Afrikaans, not Dutch, close enough to be understood by most Dutch speakers, but distinct in rhythm and tone. It was something she hadn't done in years, not in public, not at work, but it came so naturally, so quickly. What she didn't know was that just around the corner, the penthouse door had opened slightly. Thomas Greystone had been stepping out to ask for a fresh espresso, but paused at the sound of her voice. The rich, earthy flow of Afrikaans had stopped him in his tracks. There was something oddly familiar about it. Not the language itself, but the way she spoke it. It wasn't the stiff, textbook version taught in universities. It was lived in, melodic, and laced with a particular cadence he hadn't heard in over 20 years. He quietly watched her for a moment longer as she ended the call and turned to head toward the elevator. Then, without saying a word, he stepped back into his room, picked up the hotel phone, and called the front desk. "Send the maid on the 9th floor to my room," he said. There was a pause on the line. The maid, sir?" "Yes. The one who just took the call. I'd like to see her." "Now." The receptionist hesitated, confused. Guests never requested housekeeping staff, especially not personally. It was against protocol. But this was Thomas Greystone. You didn't say no to him. Meanwhile, Marisha had barely stepped into the service hallway when her earpiece buzzed again. "Marisha, can you go to the penthouse, please? Guest request." She blinked, confused. "Me? You sure?" "Yes. Room 1001. Now." Marisha's heart beat a little faster. She'd never been called to the penthouse. Housekeepers didn't go there unless something major had happened. And even then, usually a manager would go along. She smoothed her uniform and made her way up the elevator, still wondering if maybe she'd forgotten to wipe something the day before, or maybe spilled polish on the marble without realizing it. But deep inside, something told her this wasn't about cleaning. She knocked gently on the door. "Come in," a voice said from within. As she stepped inside, she immediately noticed the calm and quiet of the suite. The curtains were open, casting golden morning light across the room's polished floor. Greystone was seated at a small table near the window, reading glasses perched on his nose, holding a delicate porcelain cup between his fingers. He looked up as she entered. "You speak Afrikaans?" he asked without introduction. She froze. "Yes, a bit, I used to. I'm from Pretoria." He gestured to the seat across from him. "Sit." She hesitated. "Sir, I don't think I'm supposed to." "I won't bite. Sit." Reluctantly, she did. He leaned forward slightly. "You said something over the phone. I recognized your accent. You're not just a hotel maid." She swallowed hard. "Sir, I'm not sure what you mean." "No, I think you are sure," he said, his voice lower now, calm but sharp. "That voice, that language, and that pause. You weren't just answering a hotel call. You slipped. Because you forgot where you were. Because the voice on the other end brought back something. Someone." Marisha's hands clenched in her lap. She didn't know what to say. How did this stranger know that she had heard her father's voice? That the call wasn't from the hotel at all, but from a blocked number that hadn't appeared in years, a voice she thought she'd never hear again. She looked up at him, suspicious now. "Who are you?" Greystone gave her a long, unreadable look. Then he set the cup down gently and reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out an old photograph. Faded, edges curled. A black and white picture of a group of men standing in front of a small building, dust and sunlight in their eyes. She recognized it instantly. Her breath caught. "Where did you get that?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he asked, "Do you remember a man named Jacobus Lau?" Her blood went cold. That was her father. She stood up, suddenly unsure if she was in danger. "I don't know who you are or what you want, but—" "Wait," he said quietly. "Please, sit back down." Something about his tone stopped her. He wasn't threatening. He looked haunted. "I was once in Angola, late 90s, during something that was supposed to be a short mission. But things went wrong. Very wrong. And your father, Jacobus, he saved my life." Marisha's lips trembled. "My father disappeared in 2001. We never found out what happened to him. We thought he was killed." Greystone nodded slowly. "That's what they wanted you to think. But he didn't die. He didn't disappear. He hid. For reasons I'll explain." She stared at him, 100 questions flooding her mind. Then he said something that made her knees weaken. "He sent me to find you." And just as Marisha opened her mouth to speak, there was a loud knock at the door. Greystone's eyes darted toward it, his face suddenly serious. "Don't say a word." The knock came again. He stood, moved to the door, and opened it just a crack. A man in a dark coat stood outside, his face unreadable, eyes hidden behind tinted glasses. "Mr. Greystone," the man said in a firm voice. "We need to talk now." Greystone didn't answer. Marisha, from her place in the room, couldn't see the man's face, but she saw Greystone's posture shift, tense, alert. "I told you not to come here," Greystone said coldly. "This isn't about you anymore," the man replied. "It's about her." And just like that, the door slammed shut. The silence that followed was deafening. Greystone turned to Marisha, his face pale. "We're out of time," he said. "You need to leave with me. Right now." Marisha stood frozen, her thoughts spiraling, heart pounding in her ears. She had no idea that everything she thought she knew about her life, her family, and her own identity was about to unravel. Completely. And as they stepped out of that penthouse suite into the unknown, neither of them noticed the tiny red light blinking just above the doorframe. Watching, recording, waiting. Marisha didn't speak as she followed Greystone down the back stairwell. Her mind was spinning. She couldn't make sense of what was happening, and part of her wanted to turn back, to walk out of the hotel and pretend none of this had ever happened. But then she thought of the photo, her father's name, that voice on the phone. And the man at the door, the one who had come not for Greystone but for her. They exited onto a side street, quiet and narrow. A sleek black car was already waiting. Greystone opened the door without a word. Marisha paused just a second before getting in, taking one last look at the hotel she'd worked at for nearly 4 years. It had always felt safe, like a bubble, where the outside world couldn't reach her. But now that illusion was gone. The car pulled away slowly, moving through the cobbled streets as if nothing out of the ordinary was happening. Inside, the tension thickened with every turn they made. Marisha sat stiffly, hands clenched in her lap, eyes flicking to the man beside her. "You said my father sent you," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "How is that possible? He's been gone for over 20 years. Greystone kept his gaze forward. "He's alive, but not safe. And now that you answered that call, neither are you." She stared at him. "What do you mean not safe? Who was that man at the door?" Greystone sighed, rubbing his temple. "Let's start from the beginning." He leaned back slightly, the weight of whatever he was about to say hanging in the air. "Your father wasn't just a school teacher, Marisha. Before that, he worked in intelligence. Not officially. Not for any government, at least not one they'd admit to. He was what they call an embedded linguist. He was placed inside communities, operations, to gather intel. Covertly. He spoke multiple languages fluently, moved through environments undetected. But he got too close to something he shouldn't have in 2001. Something global, something powerful people wanted buried." Marisha frowned. "What kind of people?" "The kind who don't wear uniforms or carry ID cards. The kind who can make someone disappear without leaving a trace." Greystone reached into his jacket again, this time pulling out a slim black notebook. He handed it to her. She hesitated before opening it. Inside, the pages were filled with small, neat handwriting. Her father's handwriting. She could tell, just by looking. The first few pages were in Afrikaans, and though her eyes blurred from shock, she caught fragments of phrases. "They're watching. Not safe. If Marisha is reading this, they've found me." Tears welled in her eyes. She turned to Greystone. "Why now? Why me? I'm just a maid in a hotel. I don't even—" "You were never just a maid," Greystone interrupted gently. "You're his daughter, and he left you a piece of the puzzle, something they couldn't find. Something that, if connected with what he gave me, could expose the entire operation he died trying to stop." Her heart dropped. "Died." Greystone looked away. "I said he was alive, that was true, until last week." A silence fell in the car, thick and heavy. He was living under another name in North Africa, off the grid. He'd been in contact with me once every few years, just enough to let me know he was okay. Then last week I got a message, one line. "They're closing in." I haven't heard from him since, but 2 days later I got that photo. In the mail. No return address. Marisha wiped her eyes. "So, what does this have to do with me answering a call in a hotel room?" "You triggered something," Greystone said. "A signal. The call was placed through a ghost line, a number linked to your father's last known relay. Whoever called you wasn't random. They were looking for you, or testing to see if you were still reachable." Marisha felt like the air had been sucked out of her lungs. "So someone was waiting for me to answer?" Greystone nodded. "And now that you have, they'll come for you. That man at the hotel? He wasn't hotel security. He's ex-private intelligence. I've seen him before." "Doing what?" "Cleaning up problems." The car slowed as it approached a nondescript building in the industrial part of the city. Greystone signaled. The driver, who circled around to the back entrance. "We're safer inside." "For now," he said. Marisha followed him into the building, still gripping the notebook. Inside, it looked more like a tech lab than anything else. Screens, surveillance monitors, locked drawers. A large map of Europe with pins and scribbled notes filled one wall. "This is where I've been piecing together your father's work. His notes, his recordings. But there's still one thing missing. Something he never wrote down. Something he kept hidden." Marisha looked around the room, Overwhelmed, what could he have possibly kept hidden for this long? Greystone stared at her. You, she blinked. Me? Yes. He told me once if anything ever happened to him to find you. But not just to protect you, he said you'd have something they couldn't get their hands on. Something only you would recognize. Did he ever give you anything when you were little? A box, a pendant, anything that didn't make sense? Marisha tried to think. Her childhood felt like a blur of movement. Constant. Change. Moving from Pretoria to Cape Town, then suddenly relocating to Rotterdam with her aunt after her father vanished. But then something clicked in her mind. There was a necklace, she whispered. My father gave it to me the night before he left for what he said was a long trip. He made me promise to never take it off. I was 7, I didn't understand. But one day, it broke. And I kept it in a tin. I still have it. Greystone's eyes narrowed. Where is it? Now? At my apartment in a drawer. He stood up immediately. We need to get it, now. But just as he reached for his phone, every screen in the room went black. The lights flickered. Then, one monitor lit up again, showing a live security feed of a street. Marisha gasped. It was her apartment building. 3 men had just entered the front door. Greystone's face tightened. We're too late. And before she could say another word, the screen flickered again, this time showing a frozen image of her father, grainy and silent. A single line of text scrolled beneath his face in blinking red. Find the girl before they do. Marisha's breath caught in her throat. Who are they? She whispered. Greystone turned to her with a look she would never forget. The same people who buried your father's past, and who won't stop until they erase yours too. And with that, the building lights cut out completely. The blackout was sudden and absolute. Marisha could barely see her own hand in front of her face. The silence that followed was eerie. No hum of computers, no flickering lights, just the sharp, shallow sound of her own breathing. Somewhere in the room, she could hear Greystone moving. Quietly, but quickly. Stay low, he whispered. They've found us. Marisha dropped to her knees, heart pounding in her ears. The darkness seemed to press in on her. Somewhere in the distance, a metal door creaked, followed by slow, deliberate footsteps echoing down the hallway. She clutched the notebook tightly to her chest. It was all she had left of her father, and maybe, just maybe, it held the only answers to what was happening. Greystone moved to the corner, feeling along the wall until he found a hidden compartment. With a soft click, he pulled out a short-barrel flashlight and flicked it on, casting a dim, cone-shaped beam across the room. In the same motion, he handed Marisha a small object, metal, curved and cold. A key? She asked, confused. It's for a safety deposit box, he said in a low voice. In Brussels. I don't know what's in it, but your father said if things ever got this far, it would be the next step. The footsteps grew louder. Shadows began to form under the doorframe. Who are these people? Marisha whispered. Greystone didn't answer immediately. Then, without looking at her, he muttered, They call themselves the Chamber. Ex-intelligence operatives, rogue contractors, and elite financiers. They operate in silence behind international governments and trade deals. No faces, no names, just results. And your father? He discovered one of their pipelines, something connected to global surveillance, black market data sales, encrypted routing systems used to spy on corporations and governments alike. He tried to expose it, but they found out. Marisha's mind raced. She had heard stories, rumors whispered in activist circles about secret organizations profiting off global chaos. But this felt different. This was personal. Suddenly, the emergency lights blinked on, a dull red glow filling the room, just enough to see the outline of a man standing outside the reinforced door. Time's up, Greystone muttered. With practiced speed, he pulled Marisha to her feet and guided her to a second door at the back of the lab, hidden behind a row of dusty filing cabinets. He keyed in a code, and the lock released with a hiss. This leads to the sewer line. It's not glamorous, but it's the only way out now. They slipped through the passage just as the front door burst open behind them. As they moved through the tunnel, Marisha's mind kept returning to the necklace, the broken chain, a piece she had ignored for so long. She tried to remember every detail. Had it ever seemed unusual? Was there something hidden inside? Meanwhile, above ground, in the comfort of a high-rise office, a man watched their escape on a screen. He was middle-aged, sharp-featured, and wore a tailored navy suit. His name was Calder, one of the chamber's field strategists. He didn't look angry. If anything, he looked intrigued. "So," he said softly, to no one in particular, "the girl does know something." Behind him, a younger agent entered the room. "We lost them in the tunnels." "I'm aware," Calder replied. "They'll head for the girl's apartment. She'll want that necklace." The agent hesitated. "Do we move in now?" Calder stood and walked slowly to the window overlooking the city. "No, let her get it. Let her bring it to the surface. The father buried it for a reason. She'll lead us straight to the core." Back underground, Marisha and Greystone emerged several blocks away, climbing up through a storm drain into an alley behind a closed bakery. The night air was cold, and Marisha's clothes were damp and filthy. She didn't care. Her mind was focused. "My apartment isn't far," she said. Greystone hesitated. "They've likely cleared out already, but they'll have eyes on the building. We'll need to be smart." Marisha led the way, sticking to the side streets, alleys, and shop fronts. Her mind drifted briefly to her co-workers at the hotel. Did they even know she was missing? Would anyone care enough to ask questions? They reached her building just as the early morning sun began to creep over the horizon. Greystone scanned the area carefully before nodding. "You go up. I'll stay outside and keep watch." Marisha's legs shook slightly as she climbed the old stairwell. Her apartment was on the 4th floor. She pushed the door open slowly, every nerve on edge. To her surprise, the place looked untouched. No signs of forced entry, no open drawers or scattered belongings. Everything seemed normal. She moved quickly to her bedroom, opened the drawer under her nightstand, and pulled out the small tin. Inside, nestled between scraps of old receipts and ticket stubs, was the broken necklace. The chain was plain silver. The pendant was a small cube, about the size of a fingernail, with strange engravings on each side. She turned it in her hand, her breath catching. There was a seam. She pressed it gently. With a soft click, one of the panels popped open, revealing a tiny data chip, smaller than her thumbnail. Marisha stared at it, heart thudding. Suddenly, the floor creaked behind her. She spun around, but it wasn't Greystone. A man in a black coat stood in the doorway, face half-shadowed, a gun holstered at his side. He held up a badge. "Interpol," he said calmly. "Don't panic. We're not here to hurt you." Marisha clutched the chip in her palm, not sure whether to run or fight. "Then why are you here?" she asked. The man stepped further in. "Because that chip you're holding isn't just a key to your father's past. It's also a trigger to a very real and very current breach in European intelligence infrastructure. And every agency, Interpol, CIA, MI6, they all want to know. Who was your father working with, and why was he hiding this from all of them?" Marisha backed away slowly, her voice unsteady. "You say Interpol. How do I know you're not one of them?" The man tilted his head. "You don't." And before she could decide what to do, a burst of light and noise exploded through the room. The window shattered, smoke filled the air, and hands grabbed her from behind. Then everything went dark again. The pain came first, a sharp ringing throb in her head as Marisha struggled to wake up. Her vision was blurry, and the air was cold, too cold for any normal room. Her hands were tied behind her back, legs bound at the ankles, and a metal chair beneath her creaked. With every slight movement, there was a hum in the air, like machinery working somewhere nearby. The kind of sound you hear in government labs or old industrial facilities, sterile, forgotten places. The room was dimly lit, not by overhead lights, but by a panel on the wall casting a pale blue glow. Marisha blinked, her heart pounding. Across from her stood a man with a face she'd never seen before. Young, sharp-eyed, calm. Too calm. He held the necklace in one hand and the data chip in the other, examining it like it was a priceless jewel. "She's awake," he said without looking at her. A second figure stepped out of the shadows. It was Calder. "Good," he said, his voice even and low. "We don't have time to play anymore." Marisha's voice cracked as she spoke. "You can take the chip. I don't care. Just let me go." Calder studied her for a long moment. "See, that's the thing. It's not about the chip. It's about what your father left inside it. He didn't just record information. He embedded active protocols, auto-triggers, digital handshakes with global databases. It's a backdoor key to one of the most dangerous surveillance systems ever created. And it's locked to his biometric signature." She swallowed hard. "He's dead." Calder nodded slowly. "Yes, and yet the system responded when you touched the chip. You share a genetic link, which means you're not just the courier anymore. You're the last key." The younger agent leaned closer. "Give us the code." "I don't have a code," she whispered. Calder didn't flinch. "That's fine. You don't need to remember it. Your body already holds it." Before Marisha could process what he meant, the door swung open behind them. In stormed Greystone, covered in dust, face bloodied, but eyes sharp, with fury. He moved like a shadow, fast and silent, knocking the younger agent out cold with a swift blow. Calder turned, but it was too late. Greystone tackled him to the ground. "Move!" he shouted at Marisha. She struggled with her bindings as Greystone grabbed a switchblade from his belt and cut her loose. Her arms were numb, but she forced herself to move, gripping the edge of the table to stay upright. "Where are we?" she asked breathlessly. "Underground holding site. Abandoned intelligence base outside Frankfurt," he said. "Chamber must have retrofitted it." Alarms began to wail. A red light strobed overhead, and heavy metal doors slammed shut one by one. "They'll lock us in," Marisha gasped. "Not if we beat them to the roof." They ran, down narrow corridors and up rusted stairwells, boots echoing against steel. Behind them, shouts and footsteps followed. Marisha clutched the chip tightly, even though her hand still trembled. Her mind raced with everything she'd learned. About her father, the chamber, the chip, and the secret system built in silence beneath global networks. She wasn't just a hotel maid anymore. She was part of something massive, something far, bigger than she'd ever imagined. As they climbed the final stairwell, gunfire echoed from below. A bullet ricocheted off the railing just inches from her. Greystone pulled her behind a wall, shielding her with his body. "They want you alive," he said, panting. "But they won't care who they kill to get you." A voice echoed up the stairwell. "You're only delaying the inevitable. Give us the girl, Greystone. You know this ends with her." Greystone shook his head. "Not today." They burst onto the rooftop, the early morning sky just beginning to glow pink and gray. A helicopter hovered in the distance, unmarked, silent. Greystone pulled a flare from his coat, lit it, and waved it high. "Extraction team?" Marisha asked. He nodded. "Let's hope they got my signal." The wind howled around them and the sound of boots on stairs grew louder. They had seconds, maybe less. Marisha looked over the edge of the rooftop. The building was tall, too tall to jump. She turned to Greystone, her voice shaking. "What happens if they catch us?" "They use you to unlock the system, and they disappear into the shadows again. Stronger, untouchable." Marisha held up the chip. "Then maybe I should destroy it." Greystone hesitated. "That's not your call to make." "But I am the key," she said, stepping closer to the edge. "If I jump, they get nothing." He reached for her, grabbing her wrist gently. "Listen, you don't have to do this alone. There are others out there. People fighting in the light. We still have allies." Below, Calder burst onto the rooftop with 3 other agents. They aimed their weapons but held their fire. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Calder called out. "You don't even understand what you're holding. That chip could prevent wars, stabilize nations, or crash them. One mistake and half the world's intelligence grids fall." Marisha's voice rose above the wind. Then maybe it shouldn't exist at all. A spotlight flashed from the sky. The helicopter moved closer, a rope ladder lowering toward them. One of the agents fired. The bullet missed, but it tore through Greystone's coat. He shoved Marisha toward the ladder. Go, now! She hesitated only a second before grabbing the rope and beginning to climb. The wind whipped around her, the city spinning far below. Gunfire rang out again. Greystone returned fire, ducking behind a steel pipe. As she reached the top of the ladder and was pulled into the chopper, she looked down. Calder and Greystone were locked in a standoff. And the chip, it was still in her pocket, warm from her. From us inside the chopper, a woman in a headset nodded at her. We've got her. Heading east. Marisha didn't speak. She stared out the window as the building shrank below her. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. Soft, tired, full of love. Marisha, you were always meant to be more than the world told you. And now, as the dawn lit up the sky, the question burned brighter than ever. What was she going to do with the power she now held?